From July 17th, 1942, to February 2nd, 1943, the Soviet Red Army, overseen by Joseph Stalin, triumphantly defeated Adolf Hitler's Nazi regime at Stalingrad while suffering a tragic loss of life at a magnitude never seen before. This battle began the Allied counteroffensive, sparking the beginning of the end of World War II. Victory at Stalingrad subsequently made Soviet Russia into a global superpower, creating tensions with the U.S. and resulting in the Cold War.
August 23, 1939. Mere weeks before World War II officially broke out in Europe, Nazi Germany, led by Adolf Hitler, signed the German-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact with Joseph Stalin and Soviet Russia. This pact, written by German Joachim von Ribbentrop and Soviet Vyacheslav Molotov, detailed how the two nations would not take military action against one another for 10 years and include details on how the two would split up Eastern Europe amongst one another after the certain war in the future. Meanwhile, France and Great Britain, realizing the dangerous power this alliance had over the continent, penned a pledge to protect Poland from outside militant entities. As a result of these pacts and treaties, World War II officially began September 1st, 1939. Years prior to the breaking of the German-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact were tumultuous. In a wild gamble that France and Great Britain would not meet their treaty obligations to Poland, and knowing he had nothing to fear from the Soviet army, Hitler ordered his troops to strike east into Poland, writes History.com. As Europe fell into bloodshed and conflict, Hitler began his invasion of Poland, while Soviet Russia began to build their military power. These assaults on Germany's neighbors resulted in Poland being split between Soviet Russia, receiving the eastern side, and Nazi Germany, receiving the western side. As the battle waged on, Nazi Germany's expenses, resource-wise, had grown to unsustainable amounts. This prompted them to rethink their 10-year treaty with their then ally, Soviet Russia.
Despite the early political clout this pact had, it did not stand the test of time. As the war waged on, so did Adolf Hitler's lust for dominion. Hitler had to necessitate his need for resources with oil from the Russian Caucasus region. On June 22, 1941, Operation Barbarossa was underway, and the German-Soviet non-aggression pact was quickly forgotten. Having torn up yet another scrap of paper and shown once again how worthless his word, Hitler had plunged Nazi Germany into another adventure. The colossal and incalculable adventure of an assault on Soviet Russia headlines the Western daily press. Quickly, Nazi Germany, alongside Romania, Italy, Hungary, and Croatia, began their offensive against the Soviet Union. In its opening weeks, the nearly 3 million German forces contained within 150 divisions lined up and delved deep into Soviet territory. Victories at key areas like Smolensk and Minsk raised Nazi morale and weakened the Soviets. Despite the victories, the Germans suffered important losses at Moscow in the winter of 41 and 42. As summer rolled back around for the Germans during Operation Barbarossa, Hitler set his sights upon the industrial capital and namesake of Joseph Stalin, Stalingrad. As the German Operation Barbarossa continued throughout the Russian steppes and Caucasus, the themes of triumph and tragedy were ever more present. The quiet yet influential triumph of the Soviet army at Moscow was an echo of what was to come on the Volga River at Stalingrad. However, not only was the victory echoed, the loss of life was as well. By this point in the war, 600,000 Soviet soldiers were already captured by the Nazi army, and casualties surmounted 1 million. Because Operation Barbarossa was considered a failure, Adolf Hitler decided that a new plan of attack needed to be formed. Hitler named this plan Operation Blue. Much to the dismay of his war generals, who wanted the target of Operation Blue to once again be Moscow, Hitler decided to focus on the oil fields in the Caucasus region. Alexandru Danilov points out, seizing the oil fields of the Caucasus would have deprived the USSR of 90% from the total oil reserves.
July 17th, 1942. Germany's Sixth Army, led by General Paulus, reaches the gates of Stalingrad perched upon the Volga River. After trekking through the muddy trails and roads throughout the Russian steppes and Caucasus, German forces unknowingly begin the bloodiest and most influential battle of modern history. On the other side, a cold Joseph Stalin commands his army, aided by his general, Georgy Zhukov, and prepares his orders to keep his namesake alive. By the start of the battle, Soviet forces were 187,000 strong, with over 2,000 pieces of artillery. However, these numbers increased exponentially as the battle waged on. Across the Volga stood 270,000 Nazi infantrymen armed with 3,000 pieces of artillery, 500 tanks, and 600 aircraft. Similar to the Soviets, these numbers only grew. All signs and details observed before the battle pointed towards this being one of the most influential battles of World War II. Both sides were placed into a do-or-die situation. Nazi Germany placed an extreme amount of resources on this battle. Losing seemed almost impossible. However, it would surely spell doom for them if they began to fight a defensive war on the Eastern Front. For the Soviets, they were backed into a corner. They were fighting for their lives and their country as a whole. A Soviet soldier writes, "He ordered us to stand fast and save Stalingrad, so we knew we had to do that. It was do or die. We could not retreat. A loss at Stalingrad would mean the end of the Soviet Union." Not only was this battle life or death for soldiers, it was also for the civilians of Stalingrad itself. Stalin's tactics were a large reason why the civilian death toll was so high in this battle. Stalin shipped most of the important food supplies such as grain and cattle away from Stalingrad, leaving the citizens with little to eat. In the first 48 hours of the battle, almost 100 tons of bombs were dropped by the Luftwaffe during the Blitzkrieg. Dozens of airstrikes followed suit, and tens of thousands of citizens lost their lives, and the once populous and industrial city became rubble and war zone. Stalin's policies had begun to take their first lives. The German soldiers were not prepared for a Russian winter. A German was quoted saying, "The weather is getting worse and worse. Clothing freezes on our bodies. We haven't eaten or slept in 3 days." For months of fighting, the Nazi Luftwaffe had air superiority and the Soviets' death toll continued to rise. Stalin ordered every man, woman, and child able to wield a weapon or dig trenches to join the war effort. Stalin then ordered his infamous Order 227, which forbade the retreat of any soldier. The outlined punishments included military trial and subsequent execution. A German soldier remarked as such, that the Soviet regime was almost as unforgiving towards its own soldiers as towards the enemy. Stalin's situation did not get any better when other Allied powers, most notably the United States, refused to provide reinforcements in an attempt to keep Soviet power in check. As the Soviet troops dwindled to the tens of thousands and left with a dismal amount of tanks, Joseph Stalin knew they had to rely on generals Georgy Zhukov and Alexander Vasilevsky. Luckily, both generals formulated Operation Uranus. The operation relied on forces coming in from the northern steppes and the south of the city. Finally, after weeks of planning, on November 19, 1942, the Red Army took its first offensive strike against the 6th German Army and overtook the Romanian divisions protecting the north. Such an offensive caught the ill-equipped Wehrmacht off guard, and the harsh winter conditions disabled all Nazi air support from the Luftwaffe. The next day, another offensive from the south was taken, and the two divisions encircled the entirety of the 265,000 Axis troops by the 23rd. Just days later, Frederick Paulus surrendered to the Soviet forces. The battle resulted in a triumphant Soviet victory against the most powerful military on Earth at the time, when odds were stacked against them. This battle forced Nazi Germany to begin a defensive war against a determined and reinvigorated Red Army marching straight towards Berlin. However, the tragic loss of life during this battle alone almost overshadowed the world-changing triumph occurring at the same time. Shaken and broken, our people behold the loss of men at Stalingrad. 300,000 German men have been senselessly and irresponsibly driven to death and destruction. The casualties soared to almost 2 million total and killed 1.2 million on the side of the Soviets and 800,000 on the side of Nazi Germany.
The Battle of Stalingrad became the key turning point of the war for the Allies while halting the Nazis' progression into Russia. Antony Beevor remarked about Germany's defeat. There was no doubt that the Stalingrad campaign represented the most catastrophic defeat experienced in German history. With this failure, the Nazis were unable to create another huge offensive. The defeat crippled the Nazi war effort and caused them to begin their two-front defensive war after the invasion of D-Day began. The victory did not come without a price. The worst thing was the German artillery strikes. They worked us over good and proper. I lost many friends, said a Russian survivor. These atrocities would inspire many similar acts by the Soviet army on their way to Berlin.
The victory at Stalingrad was the beginning of the end for World War II for Nazi Germany. Without a successful Soviet army, the world would be a very different place today. Despite the massive loss of life for the Soviets, they emerged from World War II as a global superpower. With the major allies of World War II not providing aid to the Soviets during the battle, it created a lot of resentment towards the United States. This would cause tension between the two superpowers and would lead to the Cold War. During the Cold War, they would compete in having global domination through countries in politics and military might, with the examples of the Vietnam War and Afghanistan being the most prominent areas of influence during the conflict. All of this was possible by the Soviet Union coming out with a critical victory at the Battle of Stalingrad.
The Battle of Stalingrad signaled the turning point of World War II and the beginning of the downfall of Hitler's Nazi regime. It halted Germany's ruthless march into Eastern Europe and the USSR. Despite its triumphant victory, the Battle of Stalingrad brought tragedy alongside it with over 2 million casualties, as it cemented itself as the bloodiest battle in modern history.